So, Ben, let's listen to a couple of Trump's lackeys talking about what happened last night. First, here's J.D. Vance on Meet the Press this morning, sort of a supercut of some of what he had to say.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And it was only when the president decided that the Iranians were not negotiating in good faith that he took this action. Yeah. He didn't take it lightly, but I actually think it provides an opportunity to reset this relationship, reset these negotiations. The Iranians are clearly not very good at war. Perhaps they should follow President Trump's lead and give peace a chance. If they're serious about it, I guarantee you the President of the United States is too. I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long, drawn-out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back.
So that's just a great example of how they're not even trying to make an argument. Like, basically, like, oh no, we're going to be okay in this operation because Bush was dumb and the rest of the presidents were dumb and we're smart. And also, Ben, like, J.D. Vance saying we are not at war with Iran, we're at war with Iran's nuclear program is just such like unbelievable, embarrassing bullshit. Like, the brave truth teller J.D. Vance, who is, you know, writing his little book about Meemaw and Peepaw and like kissing Ron Howard's ass, trying to get a Netflix movie made out of it. You know, like fighter for the common man, skeptic of wars of choice, would have absolutely crushed any politician who said something that's self-evidently stupid and ridiculous, because he knows what it means to bomb Iran. We're at war with their country. And by the way, Trump tweeted Iran now is the choice to end this war. So they might want to get on the same page here with their spin.
Well, and first of all, we should be very clear, too. In all this bombing, because Israel's bombed them, too, and Trump said we, referring to the U.S. and Israel, Iranians have been killed. And let's not lose sight of the fact that hundreds of Iranian civilians have been killed. I'm sure hundreds more have been injured. Tehran, people have been trying to evacuate. It's chaotic. People are panicked. People are scared. Those people aren't like, oh, they're not bombing us, they're bombing the nuclear program. Those people like are part of Iran. And you can't bomb a country and kill its people and say you're not at war with them, you're at war with a facility. You know, that's just not how this works. J.D. Vance's superpower is sounding absolutely confident and assured and sometimes even intelligent about everything he's talking about, but he has no idea what he's talking about. This guy, 3 years ago was like an author, venture capitalist running for Senate in Ohio. Like, what does he know about starting a war over a nuclear program in the middle of the East with a country of 90 million people? So their level of certainty in how they talk about this the same way they talk about trans sports or ice raids, and it's reality is going to catch up to these people. There is still such a thing as objective reality, no matter how much they try to speak it out of existence.
Yeah. And no matter how arrogant they sound. Here's another supercut, Ben, of some of Marco Rubio's comments from this morning. I think he went on Fox News' Sunday show and CBS earlier today.
It was not an attack on Iran. It was not an attack on the Iranian people. This wasn't a regime change move. This was designed to degrade and or destroy 3 nuclear sites related to their nuclear weaponization ambitions.
Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I see that question being asked in the media. That's an irrelevant question.
No,
they have
that
everything
is the
they
key
need to build
point
a weapon.
in U.S. intelligence assessments. You know that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's
that
not.
The political decision had not been made.
I know that better than you know that, and I know that that's not the case. What happens next is up to the regime. Okay, the regime wants peace. We're ready for peace. Look, at the end of the day, if Iran is committed to becoming a nuclear weapons power, I do think it puts the regime at risk. I really do. I think it would be the end of the regime if they tried to do that.
So, I mean, this is just a great example of how they're just not even trying to make a case. Like, your argument is that the U.S. intelligence assessment about whether Iran has decided to get a nuclear weapon is irrelevant? What?
And there's total internal inconsistency in what he said, because he described them as 3 like nuclear weaponization sites. And then he said that it is irrelevant because they're not. They're 3 nuclear sites. It's different, right? Whether they've decided to weaponize is whether or not this is an imminent threat. And so in the same appearance, he's all over the map. It's a weaponization site. Then there's not a weaponization decision. Then it doesn't matter. And then if they do decide to weaponize, we'll end the regime, and just oozing arrogance. Again, I can't help. I hope for the best here. I really do. I don't have a lot of confidence in watching and listening to these guys.
No, not at all. So let's just talk about the Democratic Party and the Democratic reaction. I want to just make the case to Democrats that I feel like in moments like this, there is a tendency to kind of shrink from the debate and to worry that taking military action looks strong and decisive while talking about facts and nuance and restraint or diplomacy looks weak. I mean, like, what was this operation called? Midnight Hammer? Just like, let's just call it war gives Trump a boner. But like, if you let that political fear silence you now, when people are really paying attention, then only the hawks are the ones out there making the argument, and we will lose that fight. Like, remember, Donald Trump ran as an anti-war guy. He stole that mantle from the Democrats in 2016. Joe Biden made it worse, unfortunately, through his handling of Gaza, but also through what I think was principled leadership on Ukraine, right? But we became viewed as like the warmonger party. Like, we need to get back to being the anti-war party. And that means not just opposing wars like this, but also standing up for diplomatic problems, which I know I'm going to trigger you now, Ben, but like that gets me back to the JCPOA, because the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, worked. It was working when Trump pulled out of it. His own Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, testified before Congress in 2017 that Iran was in compliance of the JCPOA and that it was in our national security interests to stay in it. But he pulled us out of it. And part of why support for the JCPOA was weak, I think, is that very few Democrats would full-throatedly fight for it. It was like there was so much throat clearing about the flaws and the fact that it didn't encompass the ballistic missile program or support for proxies and blah, 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 blah. And the reason for that is because Iran's nuclear program was seen as an existential threat, one. And two, everybody knew that Iran would never cut a deal all at once. They gave up every element of what they viewed as their self-defense. But instead of just fighting for the thing, we looked weak. And like there is a direct line between Trump pulling out of the JCPOA and where we are today. And unfortunately, it runs through 4 years of Joe Biden not re-engaging on all of these matters and not getting back into the JCPOA. But like, I just think we gotta have some confidence and some courage in these moments.
Look, it should not be this complicated. The JCPOA point is the obvious one. You had a deal. It was working. Iran was complying. You didn't have a nuclear Iran or a war to worry about when that deal was in place. Trump tore it up, and that was a direct line to what just happened. And by the way, when we used to say in the JCPOA debate that it was a deal or a war, people said, oh, how dare you say that? Well, turned out that that was the case. But let's just start the clock from today. This was dangerous and unnecessary and based on lies, faulty intelligence, or just outright lies about the intelligence. The American people are against this. Republicans and Democrats are against this. This presents all kinds of risks. It's the kind of thing Americans are sick of. It's the kind of forever war politics that have cost multiple presidents. And yet Democrats still have this kind of caution about being against the use of military force or being crosswise with Israel or whatever the thing is. Let me just add this point too, Tommy, to this. How can Donald Trump be an authoritarian threat to American democracy in every realm except this one? How can you say that this guy is like a fascist who's like militarizing ICE, who's deploying the National Guard to our streets, and not be concerned about him launching a new war only several months into his presidency? The last I checked, it's not good when fascistic leaders launch foreign wars. It's very strange to say, well, I'm against all the authoritarian things Donald Trump is doing, but I'm not against this lawless war he launched against Iran in league with Bibi Netanyahu, another lawless guy who's committed war crimes already in Gaza. We're going to be on board with that because we don't want to have that political fight. That makes you look like you have no principles. That makes you look like you're afraid. That makes you look weak when we should be pointing out that Trump did this from a position of weakness. He was dragged into this by Netanyahu and a bunch of hardliners in the Republican Party. And we cannot pretend like Trump is normal in this one area of policy. He's somehow normal when he drops bombs on Iran, and he's a threat on everything else he does. That makes no sense. The same Donald Trump that is deporting people to a gulag in El Salvador and deploying the National Guard to our hometown of Los Angeles and dismantling the federal government is the same person that launched this strike and has not told the truth about it and has filled his administration with totally incompetent people, erratic incompetent people like Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth, who are in charge of this war. This is not a close call for Democrats. And I think people are watching this, including people like us who are in the Democratic Party, to be like, well, let's see some backbone from our leaders. Let's see some people who are willing to go out there and have a fight on principle that, by the way, the American people we know agree with us on.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of Democrats out there making the case that Congress needed to vote to authorize this war, and I think that's an important part of the debate. But where I'm seeing Democrats, I think, shrink from the fight is just on the substance itself, and that this is not how you solve the problem. This is not how we're going to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and that it's not okay for the United States to just act as a global rogue actor and just bomb countries without any sort of legal basis or even intelligence case for why it was imminent and necessary, right? I mean, all the Republicans who are saying, oh, no, we didn't need Congress, the President of the United States has the authority to respond to imminent threats like proliferation of WMD. The U.S. intelligence assessment as of March was that Iran was a year at least away from getting a nuclear weapon. There was no imminence here, and they're not even trying to tell us that assessment changed. They're just saying we don't care.
Yeah, and look, this is where Joe Biden got into trouble because he did a lot of good things, right? Fighting climate change, joining Paris Agreement, focusing on Asia Pacific, trying to standing up for Ukraine. But it was this region, it was the Middle East, where blank check support for Gaza, didn't go back into the Iran deal, fist bumping with MBS. You can't have a Democratic Party foreign policy where you carve out what is kind of the most important file here, which is war and peace and the Middle East and all these complex relationships. We should have a long conversation in this podcast about, if the Democrats want to have an alternative to Republicans, you have to be consistent and principled on it. And you can't kind of carve out these areas where you are acting out of political fear, because people will smell that and they won't take you seriously on other things. If they won't take your warning seriously on the National Guard in the streets while you're saying, well, I support Trump dropping gigantic bombs on a country on the other side of the planet with no legal basis or no intelligence basis, just because that's where he and Bibi Netanyahu decided to go. Yeah, and also we have a political opportunity here where you are seeing a bunch of people who supported Donald Trump in the last election come out and say, this is bad. We don't want war with Iran. This is the exact opposite of what he told us he was going to do. Some have called for him to be impeached. So we need to speak to those people and provide a clear alternative. Final thing, Ben. I mean, the international reaction has just been completely muted and bizarre, right? Keir Starmer's statement from the UK is a good example. Talks about how Iran's nuclear program is a grave threat to international security, can't be allowed to have a weapon. U.S. has taken action to alleviate the threat, blah, 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 calling Iran to return to the negotiating table. Just a few days ago, top officials in the UK were talking about the illegality of this operation. I don't know. I'm not seeing I'm not seeing a lot of voices from our allies saying much of anything. We are seeing condemnation from the Chinese, from the Russians. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said a kind of a crazy tweet. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads, and that the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. You never know with that guy, whether he's tweeting something on behalf of Putin or whether he's just shit-faced somewhere, kind of popping off on his social media account. But I don't know. I'm curious what you make of just kind of the silence in the face of this ballooning war. Mainly from Europe. I mean, the global South will be, horrified by this. Russia and China will try to take advantage of it. Europe is not unlike the Democratic Party on this one. They're afraid of Trump. They're afraid of tariffs. But the reality is at a certain point, you're going to need your own foreign policy here. Otherwise, you're just going to be riding not just shotgun. You're going to be riding in the trunk, while Donald Trump is driving the car off a cliff here. And I think early returns on this one are, you can tell they're not happy about it, but they're also kind of putting their head down. And I don't think that's very sustainable either. No.
I don't either. Thanks for watching that excerpt of the show I do with Ben Rhodes every week, Pod Save the World. We cover the biggest stories in foreign policy and national security and things happening all over the planet. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Pod Save the World, but also please subscribe to Pod Save America here on YouTube. The right wing is kicking our ass on YouTube. They have way bigger accounts. And what that means in practice is that when people are searching for political news or national security news, they find garbage from Ben Shapiro and TPUSA and just crap right-wing nonsense. And what we're trying to do is get people good, factual, progressive information. So when you subscribe, you actually help us surface that in the algorithm and, I don't know, get people better news. So thanks for subscribing to Pod Save the World and Pod Save America here on YouTube. And thanks for watching.
See ya.